Hello everyone, I'm Stephen W. Long and welcome to The Writing Life. This is going to be a fun half hour. My guest today is Betty Adams, and I didn't know a lot about Betty until about 20 minutes ago, and this has really expanded our topic. So first, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Ostensibly, initially, we want to talk about your writing, which is terrific. And that's the focus of the show. You just gave me a whole bunch more with your education and what you're up to now, and I actually want to come back to that at some point, and we'll try to sneak this in. Dying Embers. Do we have a graphic of the cover? It's just gorgeous. So a couple of things. Let's start by talking about the illustration. You told me a little bit about the illustrator. How did that come about?
Well, I am a fan of various science fiction genres, and I decided that I needed to do a piece of artwork of this giant robot I'd written about.
Okay.
And I hunted about all of the people that I followed on the website DeviantArt, which is where authors and illustrators kind of come together in a very informal way.
Okay.
And I found a young and upcoming artist whose prices were still in my range. And I really liked her speed painting style.
So, I'm sorry, speed painting?
Speed painting.
Okay, I don't know what that is.
The name is self-explanatory.
Okay.
It's a very quick and rough style.
Okay.
Like if you were going to paint an oak tree, it'd be really good for that.
Okay.
Or a fir tree, something with a lot of little tiny bits. Bob Ross style.
Okay.
So I asked her how much to do the painting in that, and she quoted me a price of $20. I said, I can afford that.
Yeah.
It's really quick. It's speed painting.
Okay.
And she gets back to me in a few weeks and she says that she really likes the concept. If she holds the price the same, would I mind if she did it in this different style, which is a much more precise style that she was just learning, so she wasn't sure of herself.
Yeah.
But it's a much more expensive style, but it did lend itself more to a robot because, you know, precision lines.
Gotcha.
I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
And it took her nearly 6 months to get it done. It was one of her first big efforts with it. And it was just gorgeous.
Yeah.
And I looked up prices for that kind of artwork, and I'd basically gotten a $300 piece of art for $20.
Yeah. Okay.
And she put it up
Off to a good start.
She put it up on her website as kind of her prime portfolio piece.
Right.
And since then, I generally do go to her for speed paintings because since then I've wanted more organic, foresty looking things.
Okay.
And
but now, are we describing the cover here? Is
yes.
Is that what that is?
This was probably about the fourth or fifth thing. I'm not going to try to pronounce her name. It starts with a Y and a Z.
Okay.
But her DeviantArt name is Era7.
Okay.
ERA7.
Okay.
And she has actually a company now with various other artists. But I went to her for my cover, and she just turned out this amazing piece of cover art.
Now again, is that this one? And the reason I keep coming back to this is sort of your concept.
Yes, this is my concept. I would do a really rough pencil sketch, but enough to show her where I wanted the figures. I would send her about a dozen photographs of a landscape. There's a little, have you ever been to the headwaters of the Wood River?
No.
Out near, it's just south of Crater Lake. Beautiful place. And there was a little pond, there's a little place where the water's a pool that just inspired me, so I took a picture of that. And then I sent her an image of a pangolin, which I can never remember if it's South American or African, but it's an anteater basically.
Okay.
And its fur has formed itself into these thick scales. So it's like an armored anteater.
Okay.
And it can curl itself up into a little ball like an armadillo can. It's got these 3 big claws for digging out its prey.
Right.
And baby pangolins are pretty big on the internet. You just Google baby pangolins. And so I sent her an image of that, an image of a bear, and I described how I wanted the bear holding the child. It was going to be a living crystal with light coming out from the inside. And then I wanted the bear lighting up the scenery around it instead of just taking light. And that's kind of the details that's really hard for an artist to get, but she's brilliant with light.
Well, it sounds like you guys, you've never met in person.
Nope.
Now she's in Korea?
She's in Korea.
South Korea, I suspect.
Yep.
Even at the distance, there sounds like there's some chemistry or something.
Yes, yes, we really hit it off, and she seems to think it, and I think it as well, that we're able to communicate these visuals.
Okay.
Because I have, they're called essential trimmers. I really like art, but I can't do it because
Oh.
in order to, my teachers gave up on my handwriting in about 4th grade.
Okay.
But I can do rough sketches, but
Sure.
no matter how much I work at it, it's never more than rough.
Right.
But I have very clear ideas of what I want to see on the paper, and she seems to have this near superhuman ability to take my notes, which are, English isn't her first language,
Right.
and I don't speak a word of Korean,
Yeah.
so I have to use short words,
Right.
short sentences. But I do my sketches, and I go like, okay, this part of the sky needs to be orangish, this sky part needs to be purple, so go orange, purple, blue,
Right.
light here,
Right.
spiky things here, kind of like
Yeah.
this. And then she'll send me back rough drafts, digital rough drafts. She'll generally send me 3, and I pick the one I like best.
Yeah.
And then she sends me back a second draft, and I give her the thumbs up. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Then she does some sort of magic fine tuning that brings it all together. And
Okay.
she works in digital medium.
Right.
But yeah, it's just, she and I can do some pretty amazing things together.
Well, it's, you're a young person, and I think it's sort of indicative of this world, the opportunities, the technology that's available to us now has opened things up, and it's fun and amazing.
It is.
But I want to move on to your writing. So your major, your direction was biology.
But general biology.
General biology.
George Fox does not have a specific wildlife biology.
Okay.
Mammals actually have always been my passion, but botany is where the funding is. So.
Okay, that makes sense. Good for you. So that, I'm trying to think how to put this together. Science is not fluffy. It's precise. It's you're looking for the truth there. I have a friend who is a former attorney, and you want that kind of precision there as well. Both of you gravitate toward science fiction. So I'm thinking, why is that? That's one thing. Is it, and in anticipation of talking with you, I thought, is it an allegory? I mean, is it that conscious that I'm going to step out of the real world so that I can tell a story without barriers, or the barriers that real life would put on me, or is it just fun?
I've been actually thinking a lot about this lately, and one of the things is that the deepest truths in the universe are almost always told in stories.
Okay.
Did you know that, you know what the oldest recorded novel is? The oldest recorded
Is it
story?
Beowulf?
Gilgamesh.
Gilgamesh,
The
all
Epic
right.
of Gilgamesh. And the Epic of Gilgamesh has a very, very similar plot to the first James Bond movie.
Okay.
It has similar character tropes. And it tells a similar story. And I think that when you're dealing with very rigid truths, or when you're trying to find the deep truths, there comes a point where you have to deal with these things. You have to speak in a very specific language, and people stop understanding you.
Okay, sure.
Like, if you just start going up plant, leaf, chloroplast, chlorophyll, eventually you reach a point where the words stop making sense to the people around you, and you're separated from the people around you.
It
And-
sounds
but
like
you
there's no
still wanna
emotion or no feeling.
Oh, no. I can't speak to attorneys,
Yeah.
but in science there are moments of inspiration that
Okay.
I've heard the great artists describe. Moments of frustration and agony when something goes wrong.
Okay.
Moments of, science is incredibly emotional. And for me it has been.
Yeah. No, that sounds great.
And sometimes, at the end of the season, I've been gathering data, not for a huge research project, just the year-to-year grind of recording how many weeds are in the national park.
Okay.
But at the end of the season, I enter the last GPS coordinate into the computer system. I put the last field data sheet in the notebook, and you're standing there with that notebook. And all it is GPS coordinates, elevation, description of what you found.
Mm-hmm.
But there's 30,000 of them that you took over the course of the season. And it's just this feeling of pride and completion as you type the final report and print that sucker out. But anyway, when you're dealing with science, you're looking for truth. And when attorneys, they're looking for the truth. And I think to express these deep truths, you have to tell stories about it.
Okay.
As for how I got into science fiction, it's in my blood. My mom was a Trekkie. My mom was the first book she ever read. Her first chapter book was Have Spacesuit Will Travel. Really? Okay. And then I learned to read well before kindergarten, but saw no point to it. But then in third grade, I read Charlotte's Web. Okay. And my mom loves to tell the story because I was reading it too fast. I was answering all the questions right on the tests, but she and the teacher were very concerned that I wasn't getting it. And she comes to the teacher and she goes, "Oh, she's getting it." I got to the part where spoiler alert, Charlotte dies. Right. And she says the whole house heard me burst out crying. And so she naturally gave me science fiction books to read. Yeah. And the speculative fiction aspect of it, I think it all comes back to that seeking the truth and wanting to express the truth.
So it's not really that different than the science. It's a different path maybe, or an expression, but you're seeking the same thing.
Yeah, and science fiction, especially speculative fiction, what I lean towards, you're looking up at the night sky and you're wondering what's out there. Okay. What are we going to encounter? You're asking questions. And you want to answer the questions. And one of the ways we do that is through storytelling. Have you ever read Never Cry Wolf? No. That is, if I had to pick any one incident that drove me towards wildlife ecology, it was a book. Mm-hmm. It's all about this scientist, government employee that gets sent up to the middle of nowhere. I can't remember if it was Alaska or Canada, but he has to observe the wolf populations to see if they're killing the caribou, which is a very common. Mm-hmm. You observe the predator species and its interaction with the prey species. And this is an incredibly complex topic. And you could write as many 40-page reports detailing everything you want, and it would be 100% the truth. Mm-hmm. And it would be perfectly accurate. How many people are going to read it? Okay, you're trying to communicate this to people, what you see. What he found was that the wolves, they not only did not harm the caribou population, they kept it healthy. Interesting. And he could chart that on graphs, and he could display it mathematically. Right. And he might have convinced 5 scientists and universities of what he'd found, but what good was it going to do? So someone sat down and wrote a novel about it, and then someone took the novel and made a movie. And then my parents brought the movie home for me to watch. Oh, boy. And so that touched me. I couldn't have been more than 7. But I still remember precise scenes from that movie and how he did his research and how he set up his experiments. I never would have gotten that from a scientific paper. Yeah, oh, that's wonderful. But I think, yeah, when you seek the truth, you want to share it. It's a pearl of great price. You want to let the world know that you have this thing. And I think storytelling is the oldest and most intuitive way to do that. Yeah. So now for you, and I'm thinking about, your childhood and so on, maybe formal education as well. You're a scientist, mm-hmm. But you're knowledgeable when you talk about Gilgamesh and tropes and so on. There was more there than just the science classes. Is that where you began to write? Did you have a minor in English? How did you start to write? I had no minor. The closest I had to that was a math minor because I love math. Okay. But do you know the book Gentle Ben? I don't. Boy, I'm striking out today. These are all, theme here is books about animals that you read between first grade and high school. Gentle Ben, it's set in a small Alaskan town, and it's about a boy who raises an orphaned bear cub. And it grows into this giant grizzly bear called Gentle Ben. Okay. And it's all about, a boy and his ex, and, it's got I'm starting to tear up.
Oh.
I haven't touched the book in 20 years.
Yeah.
But it's a very powerful book
impactful,
emotionally,
sure.
as you can tell. It's also very accurate. It describes how these bears actually are, how even this gentle giant who has no malice in him can still be very dangerous to the human population because he is over 1,000 pounds of predator that has never known a higher predator than him.
Right.
It has no fear. And the slightest casual swing of its paw can be incredibly disfiguring.
Right.
Disfigures a character. The character had it coming, but still. This book shows the way this bear interacts with its environment. And I think he ends up getting taken off to they take problem bears off to these islands out, and they oftentimes just swim back to shore. But yeah, and so I realized how much power that book had. I thought, I want to do this. I want to be able to write a book for children that can touch them the way Gentle Ben touched me.
Yeah.
And other than that, my dad was and is a prolific reader. He kind of installed the love of reading in me. And my mom was a prolific acquirer of knowledge. She didn't read formally as much as Dad did, but she talked with people. She'd find she hung out with the super intelligent kids at her high school. She went to multiple high schools, but she always ended up with these, I guess we'd call them like super geeks, the people who would become Bill Gates types.
Right.
And they liked her because she could communicate with them. So my mom had this super ability to communicate with people. And so she had amassed this great body of knowledge. And because I grew up in that environment, I didn't think I was particularly strange until I started being among peers of my own age in my own field. And they have a game called Stump Betty, where they try to ask me a question I know nothing about.
Right.
And I'm not entirely sure why. There is something different about my brain. I had a relative who they suspected of having a condition. It's an inflammation of the brain tissue itself, the actual gray matter.
Okay.
And it causes the brain to basically overclock. And I was supposed to be the control for my relatives, just to see what the family looks like normally. And mine was the one that got sent to the specialist because the circles are all supposed to be green, which is normal, and then it was like green, yellow, orange, red, and mine were like 90% red. They're like, your brain doesn't shut off. I'm like, that explains a lot. So what the doctor thinks is that I have an overformation of memory. And the formation of memories also kind of it gives all of that pointless energy a place to go. And
that is so interesting.
The reading, my near obsessive reading as a child was actually sort of a self-medication. Because, I mean, imagine if your arm's flailing around like this, and you can stop it by writing.
Right.
But the moment you stop writing, your arm starts flailing around. It doesn't hurt, but it's annoying.
Right.
Imagine how much you'd write. So for me, it was learning. Things like repetitive things like Tetris or just basic math.
Okay.
I love doing basic arithmetic and algebra because it directs that energy. And this is all something I only discovered about a year ago. But so I know things. It's what I do.
You know, it's interesting, and it's a terrific segue because I didn't know we were going there, but you've done a variety of things. And I locally here, Garth Stein, a well-known author, gave a talk here at Linfield, and he was asked by a young lady what would be his advice for a young person to become an author. And his advice was not unexpected to me, but I think it was to her. He said, stow away a tramp steamer or get a job on an oil rig or go to Africa, or in other words, you have to have something to write about. So, it's experience either formally as education, but maybe better informally, just get out and live some. So that leads me to Aberrant Tales and your story in there. Because talk a little bit about that. Where did that come from?
Well, by the time I wrote Worth It, which it's a collection of short stories,
Right.
and you can tell from the title, they wanted stories that were a little bit off, a little bit different.
Okay.
And I was writing more deliberately by this point. I was kind of reining in my muse and channeling it in ways I wanted it to go. And I'd figured out that to write stories that touched people, you find a feeling or a thought that everybody has but nobody talks about. And one of the things was that when the federal government, be it the NPS or the Fish and Wildlife or the Bureau of Land Management, they have to send their employees into the backcountry a lot, out into the wilderness. And they like to make sure you're sane before they send you out there,
Good
so you don't
idea.
go stir
Right.
crazy.
Right.
And some people adapt really well. Some people have to be, I've had coworkers, we get sent out to the bush together and they have to be called back
Really?
2 weeks in because they just can't take the isolation.
Okay.
And on the other hand, you have people who like it a little too much, who get to the point where they're only comfortable when they're out there in the middle of the Alaskan bush, 25 river miles from the nearest village. And I turned out to be the second type. And they warned me up and down how isolated I was going to be, how tiny the village was. And I got out there, I'm like, what are you talking about? This village is half again the size of Grand Ronde when I was growing up.
Really?
And I just settled into the wilderness experience, and it's like not like there's any real hardship. I mean, we got all the food we need, and
Right.
we got propane tanks and backup generators. So, but it's just the isolation, and apparently it really wears on people. But like I said, you can't go too far the other way. And Worth It is a story about a space ranger who gets sent out to monitor space whale populations.
Space whales.
You make it science fiction by setting it in space.
Okay.
There has been...
And I hope we have time to talk about that too, but we'll get there.
And it's a short story. It's just about, from his perspective, what I took was an experience I had. It was called the bear shift. It was midnight to 4 a.m. You're out in the middle of a river counting salmon. You can't listen to music because you have to be alert to the bear that might be sneaking up behind you because you're standing in the middle of his favorite food source. And you have to be completely 100% alert to everything that's going on around you. Meanwhile, it's midnight to 4 a.m. It's not truly dark. It's not light enough to be light. And
Now, this in Alaska?
yeah, yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's in Alaska,
Sure.
25 river miles from St. Mary's Village, which is on where the Androsky River meets the Yukon. It's near the coast.
Okay.
So close to Russia, maybe.
Yeah.
But anyway, but point is, it's the middle of nowhere, and you are at least 2 hours from any kind of emergency help. You're on your own, and there's bears, there's moose, there's the never-ending clouds of mosquitoes, and you're out there in this weird, unnatural twilight that just lasts and lasts and lasts, and you're just counting and counting and counting, and I adapted to it, and there's a point out there where you're just utterly exhausted, but you're just in tune with everything. And there's this
nice.
feeling of just being in tune with everything and knowing that there's so many things out there that could just crush you like a bug. But but you are alive. And there are so many ways you could die, so many ways you could be injured. And it just gives this thrill to life. And when your shift is over, when they call you back in, they say there's a flash flood coming down the river, you need to get out of the middle of the river.
Sure.
And then you're back safe. And you're sitting there, you're still in the middle of nowhere, you're still surrounded by all these threats, but the immediate threat has just come and gone. And I really can't describe it. That's why I wrote a short story.
Right.
But it's just a feeling of it being worth it. The threat and the stress and all these dangers that most people in the civilized world don't even think about. Like the water itself is a threat. You have to make sure the filters are working.
Sure.
Every substance you put on your body, every substance you ingest, you have to think about. And it adds these layers of complexity to your life. And yet, there's just these moments where it's like your soul reaches out to touch the infinite.
You're a poet.
And it's worth it. It's all worth it. life, the suffering, the stress, the danger. It's all, and that's where that story came from.
That's lovely. We are getting down here, but talk about your Dying Embers.
I graduated in 2008 from George
Okay.
Fox University. I'd taken a 300 level writing class, fiction writing.
Okay.
So because I wanted to have those skills. And then I got out into the workforce and doing my daily life. 2 or 3 years went by and I hadn't written anything outside of a technical report. I couldn't write a mean technical report, but I thought, you know, my goal is to write a children's book someday. So I'd better check and make sure I still have that skill set.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, because I didn't use it, I lost it. I mean, I wrote a short story and I realized that I could not even string 2 paragraphs together correctly.
Oh my gosh.
And I tried various ways of just doing it all by my lonesome, setting various schedules, and I just couldn't inspire myself to write anything until I joined some online writing groups. And then I had feedback, and, you know, that human-to-human contact. And these are people all over the world, literally. I made a friend in Wales, North Carolina, other parts of Great Britain. And with the feedback allowed me to keep writing. And so I started writing this story. And I got into all these stories intending for them to be comedies. And I get about 3 chapters into this story. I'm like, oh, this is shaping up to be pretty serious. I got about 10 chapters in, and I just burst out crying because I realized that what I was doing was I was writing down a very personal story.
Was that revealed to you? You didn't know it in the moment?
No, I was writing about giant aliens from outer space.
Okay.
And I got to the end of the chapter and I looked over what I had done, and I'd realized that it's about baby aliens that get adopted by a human. But I'd had a friend who'd had a terminal, whose baby had had terminal illness. And they'd basically known from the time the baby was 2 months old that the baby wasn't going to make it.
Oh boy.
And our families were very close. And so I'd kind of been the only child in the whole family setup that did not have a best friend in that family. So our families were very close. But I was kind of separate. And I'd never truly had a chance to work through my own mourning because I was, the oldest. I was always doing something.
Right.
I never
You're
thought
a caretaker.
about it and so all of that, like nearly 10 years of emotion that I'd never thought about, just kind of all came out into this story. And it was a very private thing because I knew on some level that this wasn't my grief. I was just an outside observer, but it affects, when you're a caretaker in that kind of situation, it really affects you. But you don't always have the proper mechanism. I'm not the best at emotional coping. So I wrote this story, I posted it online, and I've been told I made battle-hardened soldiers burst out crying on public transportation.
Oh my gosh.
And so this book was supposed to be a comedy. But the tragedy wrote itself. It makes you understand the old Greek concepts of the genius. It was a little creature that came and spoke to you at night, and it determined what you wrote. So, but yeah, so I ended up writing this, and it took me about 3 years of editing to find a publisher, and I found a sort of hybrid publisher. They have all the contacts in the field, but you have to do your own marketing. They've recently shut down.
That approach is fairly standard, I think.
But yeah, so I ended up writing the book, and my friends told me I should go for a publisher, and the publisher found it worthwhile to print it.
Great.
It hasn't been a huge success, but it's encouraged me to go on with my writing.
I think it depends on how you define success. It sounds like it may be cathartic for you. It's certainly been enjoyed by other people. Isn't that a success?
That is.
Oh, I think it's just terrific. The writing group that I'm in now has been in existence a long time. I think it was started in the mid-90s. And there was a fellow there at one time who, I don't even know that they knew the term then, but he had PTSD and had really not done well with any of the therapy that they'd tried. And I think in desperation, his therapist said, try writing it down, And I think because of that, that was the motivation to join the group. And he wrote it down, and anyway, it became a book, and he could sleep after that. So I think that's a success.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a very, the technical details were very fun to write. I had to
I'll
reach
bet.
outside of my own field.
Yeah.
I wanted to do a non-carbon-based life form.
Okay.
And so that involves a lot of chemistry, which is my least favorite science.
Uh-huh.
But fortunately, once I got the basic chemistry worked down, the rest of it sort of flowed from there. And
Oh, good.
there's silicon-based life forms, simply because silicon is the closest molecule to carbon, and in speculative science and science fiction, it's generally considered to be the most, if we're likely to find anything that's not carbon-based out there, it's probably going to be silicon-based, if we can recognize it as life.
Okay. I'm going to stop you there and say two things. One, thank you so much. We're out of time. Number two, can you come back and let's do this again?
Sure.
I think we, what I really wanted to talk to you about was the shadings of science fiction, and we just don't have time, but thank you so much, and let's do it
Thank you.
again.
That sounds like a great idea.
Good, thank you. There's a fast half hour, folks. Goodness sakes. Come back and see us again. Maybe we can pick this up some other time. I'm Stephen W. Long. My website is stephenwlong.com. We're working on it, putting some new fun stuff in there, so just drop me a line and come visit that way. Thanks, and thank you.
What do you think? We done?
I don't know. You guys want to do one just with yourself without me doing the
think we're
bongos?
done.
No,
They got
no.
enough. They got enough.
Really got enough? Probably. Okay, sounds good.
Let's go to lunch.
Oh.
I'm hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can just bite too.